Hey friends and first-time listeners perhaps. It's Kevin here from the Tom Petty Project podcast. Today's episode is part two of the fantastic conversation that I had with Jon Scott last Monday. In the first part of the interview, I really wanted to give Jon some space to really tell his story, specifically about how he broke that first Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers record. In the second half, what you're going to listen to now, we bounced around a little bit more and it was a lot more conversational, which I really enjoyed. We talked about Jon hitting the road with the band and cementing his relationship with Tom in the process. And then we got into the tactical bankruptcy of the band and how that led to Jon joining Backstreet Records along with Tom, and then the promotion of the tour de force, Damn the Torpedoes. We also chatted about how fantastic the Tom Petty Nation Facebook group is and what a great community of fans that is, and Tom's genuine two-way relationship with those fans. But we mainly talked in this episode about what type of human being Tom Petty was, what a good friend he was to have, and it's one of those, when you do talk to one of Tom's friends, everything you hear about the man only makes you miss him that much more. So let's get into part two of my conversation with sizzling Memphis natural Jon Scott.
And all of a sudden, all I wanted to do was go on the road with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Yeah.
He invites me up to Santa Cruz, California, and to play in some armory or, I don't know, some small auditorium.
Yep.
But the fans knew who they were in Santa Cruz because they listened to K-San in San Francisco. And the place is packed. And
yeah,
he's just tearing it up. And I see he does 6 encores. I've never seen that happen in my life. And the crowd is still chanting, wanting more. And I go backstage, I go, Tom, these guys want more. He said, Jon, we don't know any more songs.
We've played them all. We've done everything we
played them all. That's kind of the second thing that said, oh my God, a band doing 6 encores. I've never seen it before in my life.
Yeah. Well, and especially that brand of rock and roll, it takes so much energy. You must have been absolutely just beat after doing that many.
Oh, well, as a musician, when they play, they put out a lot of energy. And it's hard for those guys to come down after the show.
Yeah.
But anyway, after that show that night, all I wanted to do was get on a tour bus with Tom Petty.
Yeah.
And there was no girls allowed on the tour bus. It was all the guys sitting around. We were talking about new music or Zombies or the Kinks or whatever Tom loved. And I'm still working as head of album promotion. There's other albums out, but I'm just going. And Tom would say, I want the next concert to be better than the last one. I want the next album to be better than the last one. And he delivered on all fronts on that.
Yeah.
And I just kept watching him every night going, I'm watching history being made. It was just one of those things where I just knew it. I could see it. I could feel it.
I think that's interesting too. Do you think, because it's a little bit no girls on the bus,
right?
And, there's no sort of, I don't think there was any hard drugs at that point. So that's atypical for a rock band that's getting some success in that day and age, where you always feel then, I think that's maybe what added to that longevity that him and the band had was that it was the music first. It always felt like, to me, it's the music, that's the most important thing. We need to be really good, and then everything else we'll worry about later, but get the music right first. So is that's accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. Okay. And when I go back and listen to the first album, I did the other day, and I'm going, that was no debut album by a band.
Yeah.
I mean, American Girl Breakdown, Luna, and you go, that's a band's big album.
It's huge, but better than most rock bands have ever done. Better than most rock bands' best album.
Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, it was just, you listen to it. If you were any kind of musical ear, you'd go, that's a hit record.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I did get. I was on the road with him for weeks, watching every concert. I felt like I was watching history being made every night.
Yeah,
because the crowd just kept reacting the same way as the night that they did 6 encores.
Yeah,
and that was my life. I just said, I'm the Tom. And everybody at the office is kind of going, well, you might want to come back and work a couple of other records. And I did. They called me back and wanted me to hear a record. You probably read it in the book. They called me back and said, well, the president has a big record. He wants to play you you got to get off the Tom Petty tour. And I was going, shit, damn, I'm having a good time. And the guys in the band are just the coolest. Tom is the coolest. Benmont's the coolest. Ron Blue is the nicest guy in the world. Stan Lynch, what a great drummer. What a great background singer he was. Benmont Tench, killer, and just, but nice guys.
Yeah.
And so I went back to LA, and they had me in a room with the producer of the album that this guy, the president, liked. And the producer and the president are all sitting in my office waiting to hear my opinion of this record.
Yeah.
And I heard this. They said beforehand it's kind of jazzy and it's kind of long. And for me, that was like strike one, strike two.
Yeah.
But it's a rock band, I went, okay. And they didn't tell me who it was. I listened to it. I hear Call Me Alabama, Call Me the Deacon Blues.
Yeah.
And I flipped at that second. And I looked at the guy, I said, can this be a single edited? And can I have for Crimson Tide?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll call Alabama the Crimson Tide, Call Me Deacon Blues. Can you give me blue vinyl with an edit on one side and the long version on the other side? And they all went, okay.
Yeah.
And within 6 weeks, it was the most added record in America.
And it's a killer record. That is a killer record too.
Asia is like, you can go back and listen to it right now and go, oh my God.
Yeah, it's a super.
I mean, he had every great jazz player, and it was incredibly produced.
Yeah.
As you go look back upon it. But anyway, glad I went back to see Tom Petty, hanging out with Tom Petty. I mean, I couldn't get Tom Petty out of my car, my house, my work. That's all I was listening to.
Yeah.
And I didn't care if I've heard it 20 times. Every time it would make him sound better. Yeah, I started going on tour with Tom Petty, and it was going great. Stations were hitting the record, but there was a consultant who controlled 90 FM stations at that time. His name is Lee Abrams, or Abrams Burkhart. And I said, I told Charlie, I said, I've got to go to the top 10 stations in America who are Burkhart Abrams consultant. And I got to get this record played. And I go to Dallas, and I meet with the program director. And he said, just sit in the office, and I'll be off there in 10 minutes. And I said, okay, fine. And he wasn't playing Tom Petty. And I open up Billboard, and I'm looking through it, and I see the page where it says number 40 on the charts.
Yeah.
And I'm just going, oh my God, that's great. So he comes back in, but then circled on this Billboard magazine was, do not play this record. It's a Jon Scott hype.
Yeah.
And I just took the magazine and threw it across the room. I was so pissed. And he came in and said, John, it's our consultant. They won't let us play the record. They think it's a punk band. I'm going, oh my God. Anyway, at that minute, I said, I'm flying to Atlanta to meet these guys and explain to them what's going on.
Right.
And I did. I met Lee Abrams, and I just flew to Atlanta, got in the car, and I said, I want to see Lee Abrams. And he was there, and he met with me. He said, well, I've kind of been watching what you guys are doing, but let me think about it. And this guy controlled 90 stations.
Yep.
And I had this, kind of feeling like, well, maybe I have a chance. And next morning he said, do you think Tom Petty would consider doing 10 or 15 concerts, and what we call low dough concerts?
Right.
For example, if the station's 103 in the dial, the tickets would be $1.03. He said,
it's a clever angle, isn't it? It's a neat little marketing trick to do that. I quite
like
that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And some bands were doing that back then.
Yeah.
And for some reason, ABC Records said, okay, they had the feeling that something was going on. So they said, we'll support this tour. And we played Memphis, for example, first concert for $1.03. And all we wanted to do was have people go in this auditorium, see this band. And when people walked out, they were freaking fans.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, they're probably one of the greatest rock and roll bands in the world. They're right up there with Bruce and Stones, and Tom Petty was so proficient. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't remember the last Stones record I heard, but I love them. But
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and that's when I've had conversations with my friends about, why are you getting so into Tom Petty? I'm like, look, here's the deal. A lot of those artists, like The Boss is great. I love Springsteen,
sure,
but a lot of his later albums, they lost a little bit of punch. That I don't think they're quite as good as that middle period or the early stuff.
well, he went to Nebraska. That's when he lost me at the Nebraska.
Absolutely. But Petty's level never ever dropped. There's not one single album that he released that's below fantastic. There just isn't.
Never.
Not one.
The second record had, Listen to Her Heart.
Yeah.
And it had the word cocaine in it.
Yep.
And the record company said, you got to change it. And he's going, I'm not changing it.
Champagne. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense.
I changed it to champagne from cocaine. Yeah. And he said, well, it wasn't champagne, it was cocaine. And cocaine was a lot more expensive than champagne. I'm not changing that lyric. But FM stations ate it up.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, everything just clicked. It was like this thing was like supposed to click. And it happened all by accident in a certain way.
Yeah. I did want to ask you, just while we're in a bit of a lull,
sure.
When you're touring with the band and you're the PR guy, and obviously, like you said, you're the album promotion guy for the record label, your job with the band on the road is what? What are you there? What's your actual job with the band on the tour?
Well, I'm making sure that they go, if we can secure interviews in a certain town who are playing the record. That was the main object. That was my first job. Yeah. My other job was to make sure that all these radio guys came to, I would have a party before the show, and pass out tickets to all the DJs. And I didn't want them to just give the tickets to somebody else. So I made them come to me to get the tickets. And we would have a bus. We'd bus everybody over to the concert. And of course, these guys heard Tom Petty and saw him and came back just like Charlie Kendall going, oh my God.
Yeah.
This is something different.
So then that job then as a PR guy, it's all contingent on you developing a really strong network of contacts with radio stations all over the country then, right? And maintaining those relationships. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And cool. And it was the greatest time in my life because Tom is such a cool guy. He's not an asshole. He is a cool guy. And all of a sudden he has no idea if he's going to make it, break it. He was doing well in England, but what would have happened if I hadn't picked up that record? And the answer is nobody knows.
Yeah. I
mean, probably he would have got signed by another label. I can't doubt that. But Clive Davis from Columbia Records turned him down.
Yeah. Well, I think so. I was thinking about that too. Like, he was so good that eventually he would have broken through at some point somewhere, right? No question, because that level of talent, you can't keep that down. That's just no way.
Tom could have said, "Screw this whole thing." Mudcrutch failed.
Yeah.
Tom Petty and Heartbreakers' first album failed. I'm going back to Gainesville.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a guitar teacher.
Yeah, could have done. Yeah.
I think in my heart, of course, I think another label would sign them. But when I saw that Clive Davis took Dwight Twilley over Tom Petty, I thought, well, would he have been signed by another label?
Yeah.
Probably, but I don't know.
And also, but the point I was going to make though was that even if he had been signed by another label, that first record might have just vanished. And given, if it was sort of that record didn't do well, so maybe we just have to write different songs, maybe it would have changed the whole course of where that band went creatively, Mm-hmm. So again, I mean, thank God you got that record played, because we couldn't live without Breakdown and American Girl and Luna and Fooled. Those records have to be there, right?
Oh my God. I mean, you hear the first album, you hear Luna, or you hear American Girl, the headphones, and vocals are going this way, and guitars are going this way. And it was excellently produced. It was a fantastic first album.
It's a great record, yeah.
Band. But there was this thing that felt like this whole thing was supposed to happen. I can't explain it. It was the reason why I knew Mudcrutch.
Yeah.
And it was a serendipity moment. And I have a lot of serendipity moments in my life.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that just felt like it was supposed to happen this way.
And even the bad things then, right, too, because I know that obviously you talk about when ABC was bought out, by
Right.
MCA. That, and obviously Tom's not having any of that. Tom's not working with
Well,
MCA,
I'm
and
not
obviously
having
you're
it
not
either.
having it
They had
either.
just
So
fired me. They had just
yes,
fired me for Johnny Cougar, and I'm going, I don't want to go to MCA. And he goes, well, they screwed up Mudcrutch. I don't want to go to MCA.
how did that work then? Because it was Backstreet, right? Was the record company that
It was going to be MCA, and
right?
Tom had a terrible deal at Shelter, and MCA wanted him lock, stock, and barrel like a piece of meat.
Yeah,
And he finally realized he had signed away his publishing to Shelter, and MCA was going to take it
yeah,
and take all of his publishing. They filed for bankruptcy, which
yeah,
stopped the whole thing.
yeah.
Actually, kind of funny. I mean, as a side thing here, when MCA was kind of coming in and buying ABC, all my friends at ABC were going, John, you need to go ask Tom and the manager for a point on the next record. If I know you know what a point is.
Yeah.
You can explain it. There's 17 points. Producer gets some, the band gets some. They would tell me, just ask for 1 point. So I did. I go to Tom and I said, don't you think I deserve it? He said, well, yeah, you deserve it. Just call Tony.
Thanks.
So I went to see Tony. I said, Tony, you know what's happened here. There's a band about to be dropped. I think I deserve a point on the next record. And he said, John, I'd love you do deserve a point, but there's not going to be another record. And that's when he said that we're filing for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So the next 2 years, they go out and just tour, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. They're fighting MCA at the time.
Yeah.
And that's when, well, Cameron Crowe, the producer Cameron Crowe, was friends with a kid named Danny Bramson at MCA. And Danny was the head of Universal Studios. He was the guy who ran Universal Studios, booked the acts.
Right.
He was doing a great job, and he became kind of the golden boy at MCA. And Warner Brothers actually offered Danny a label, and MCA heard about it, and they said, screw that. We're going to give you what you want. He said, I want my own record label named Backstreet Records, which is named after Bruce Springsteen.
Yep.
My life had taken a turn after I said, well, I don't want to go to MCA. And a guy walked in my office and said, my name is Spencer Proffer, and I've watched what you've been doing with Tom Petty. I said, well, who are you? And he said, well, I'm married to Trudy Green, the manager of Stephen Bishop, who had a song called On and On.
Yeah.
It was a hit record. And he said, I'd like for you to come and listen to a band I just produced, or an artist I just produced. And he said, it's a space opera. And at this point, I'm kind of going, well, I don't want to go to work for MCA.
Right.
Still there. And so I go hear this rock opera. And he turns all the lights out from the studio. And you can see the little lights from the board.
The console, yeah.
Yeah. And I was in the right frame of mind. So I got to the point. Okay, I admit that. And he played me Billy Thorpe, Children of the Sun.
Right.
And I freaked out. I totally freaked out. It was so good. He said, this is Australia's #1 singer.
Yeah.
And I went to ABC the next morning. I said, you guys have got to listen to this guy, Billy Thorpe. He's got an amazing album. And they went, we're not signing any new bands. And I was kind of like, wait a minute. I just went through Tom Petty. I just went through Steely Dan. I worked Jimmy Buffett, Cheeseburgers in Paradise, and I'm on a roll. And they're telling me they don't even want to listen to the record.
Yeah.
But little did I know that MCA was in the process of buying ABC. So my friend was a guy named Phil Rush, and he worked for Capricorn Records. And he lived in Memphis, but he had been transferred to Los Angeles. I said, Phil, would you come over and just listen to this Billy Thorpe record? What's your opinion? And he came over, same thing, sat in the captain's seat in the control room.
Yeah.
And freaked out like I did, this Billy Thorpe record, Children of the Sun. And so he said, do you mind if I have a copy? And the producer said, no. And he said, I want to send it to Phil Walden, president of Capricorn Records. And Capricorn Records is a Southern-based band, Marshall Tucker, the Allman Brothers.
Right.
Not even in the back of my mind did I think that Capricorn Records was signed this guy. So Phil sent the record to Phil Walden, the president of Capricorn. They were in New York, and I think he sent it overnight. And so they got on the Capricorn jet that night. So the next day I get a call going, we want you to go to work for Capricorn Records. And we've just signed Billy Thorpe to Capricorn.
Right.
I'm going,
Yeah.
will you come to Georgia then 2 days from now? And I'm just kind of sitting there going, okay, yeah, sure. I love Billy Thorpe. Nicest guy in the world. All of a sudden, they said, we're going to have a jet for you waiting at the Van Nuys Airport in Los Angeles, and we're going to fly you to Macon, Georgia, and you're going to sign with us as VP of Special Projects or something. And all of a sudden, I'm at the airport, and I'm flying to Macon, Georgia, and they've signed Billy Thorpe over the phone.
Right.
And so I went to work for Capricorn Records. We broke Billy Thorpe's Children of the Sun record. And everything's doing great. Here I am, another label. Billy Thorpe is on the radio. Children of the Sun is a space opera, something like nobody's ever heard before.
Yeah.
And then I'm working for, we break Billy Thorpe. And all of a sudden, Capricorn filed for bankruptcy.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I don't have a job again. And he still owes me $6,000, but he's passed away. So
Oh, geez.
they folded, and I didn't have a job again. But about 2 days later, I get a call from Tom's manager going, "We just signed a deal with Backstreet Records. A kid named Danny Bramson. He's got his own label. We're going to be on Backstreet Records, and you're part of the contract. Will you go to work for Backstreet Records?" I went, "Hell yes! I don't have a job."
Yeah.
And then I go meet Danny, and he's one of these kids that, you know, he heard Tom Petty like I did and flipped out.
Yeah.
And he signed Tom Petty, and I think Tom owed the record. I think they owed MCA Records about $3 million or something.
Holy, what?
Yeah. And Danny got that all wiped out.
Wow.
Made a deal with Tom to start new. And all of a sudden they're going, "You have a job at Backstreet Records." And I'm going, okay, I'm going back to MCA Records, but they'll probably fire me because they did 6 months before. Anyway, all of a sudden we listened to Damn the Torpedoes, Cameron Crowe, myself, Danny Bramson, a few other people, and we just freaking knew.
Yeah.
We knew that was the breakthrough album. Because he had been produced by Jimmy Iovine.
Yeah.
Who made himself, name with Bruce Springsteen. But in that album, there were people, when it came out, people, FM stations were playing 5 tracks off that album.
That's just insane.
Which
that
is
doesn't,
insane.
Yeah.
We flipped out when we heard Down the Torpedoes, and we knew we had to do everything in the world to make that record Tom's career record, the breakthrough record. And it was.
Yeah.
And then Tom and I, we became really good, close friends. And, one of the things I loved about Tom is we would go to his house and he'd play records like the Zombies or the Kinks. And I'd play new records, and we just all sitting at his turntable. And I remember I was working for I had gotten, after Backstreet, they didn't need me, and a company hired me because they had been watching what I had been doing. Yeah. With Tom and Steely Dan, and they offered me more money than I could possibly think of to go to work for them. And I told Tom I got to leave, and he said, I said, "I'm here for you, Tom, anytime you want." And he was a little, he was a little depressed about that, but he said, "I know what you got to do." Damn the Torpedoes was his breakthrough album. Yeah. And there were several hit records off that album, and all of a sudden Tom Petty was a superstar, absolute superstar. And he started going out and playing gigs, and it just kept getting bigger, bigger, and bigger. And people were just being honest. This band's one of the most amazing bands I've ever seen live. And Tom writes songs that me and you can relate to.
Of course. I mean, and I think that's sometimes with people who don't know much about the band or much about the, the Heartbreakers or Mudcrutch or any of the background, is they think it's Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. They think that I've heard people say, "Oh, that's his backing band." And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, they're a band. They're a band, and they're seriously talented musicians. Like you said, you keep talking about Mike Campbell, and I've said this to anyone who listen. You know, you were talking about Full Moon Fever, and you said, I've never heard Mike Campbell play a bad note in my life.
That's exactly right.
And I totally agree. He's one of the top 10 rock guitarists of all time, easily, hands down. I don't care what anyone says. He's not a shredder. He's not he doesn't do all that virtual stuff, but he plays exactly what every song needs, exactly right.
Exactly. You've got it so right. I mean, it's just like sometimes Mike would write the music. I mean, he would write music and take it over to Tom's, and Tom would put lyrics to it. But for a while they collaborated, of course. But he hit every note, and there's little notes thrown in. I think Rolling Stone has him number 75 on the top guitarist. I just have to laugh. I'm going.
It's a joke. I mean,
but Mike doesn't care. He does not care. He's the kind of guy. He's a Southern guy, just like everybody else on. And he's like, I don't care what place I'm in. I know what I did.
Yeah, and he doesn't need Rolling Stone to tell him he's good, because he's played with Dylan, he's played with the Heartbreakers, he's backed up the Roger McGuinn from the Byrds. You don't get to do, or he's played with Johnny Cash, he's played with John Prine. You don't get to do that if you're no good. You don't get asked to play with those guys if you're no good.
No, you're right. You're totally right. I can't tell you. His fans are over the top.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of bands, and I've seen a lot of fans. I've never seen anything like a Tom Petty fan.
Well, Keith Eveland on the Tom Petty Nation, like when I joined that group, that Facebook group, was like, oh, these are my people.
Yeah.
These people love Tom Petty as much as I do. And this is, and it's just constant. The number of posts per day on that group, and the love and the sort of, it's fantastic. It's such a great place to hang out. You get stuck for hours on there sometimes.
You see pictures that you've never seen before. And I'll throw something up there, and but I think Tom Petty Nation had 16,000 fans when he passed away, and went to 35,000 like next day.
Yeah, and it's 45 I think now or something. It's just crazy. Yeah.
But Tom Petty, see him in concert and you never forget it.
You know, and I never did. It's one of the greatest regrets, because I only really got sort of, when the penny really finally dropped for me was about 2016, when I heard Wildflowers.
Oh yeah.
And that was the album. It was just like, oh no, this guy's not just rock and roll. He's not just, this guy can do anything. This guy can write any song, because that album is, it's probably one of the top 5 albums of all time for my money. It's just, it's incomparable.
Absolutely. And if you don't hear that, something's wrong with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the Divorce album.
Yes. Yep.
Well, some people think Echo was the Divorce album, but Wildflowers was his Divorce album.
Yep.
And he had gone some, it's tough being a rock star and being married. And Tom is like, he's in the studio every day, just picking a lick out.
Yeah.
Trying to find the right words to it. And he said, I've heard him say before, the muse comes to you.
Yep.
If you ignore the muse, it's kind of impolite. But the muse would drop a song in his hand.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know what a muse is. I mean,
of course. I did a separate podcast I did with a friend of mine last year, and we talked to an artist out of Alberta, Canada, named Randy Baylor, a band called Punch Drunk Cabaret. Okay. And he explained it. He said, people ask anyone who writes songs, well, where do you get ideas from? He says, it basically songwriters, they've got an antenna up into the sky, and sometimes that lightning strikes, and all you're doing then is channeling it. It's not really anything to do with you, almost. You're just trying to write down what you're getting,
Exactly. That's Tom Petty to the max. Yeah. I mean, that's what happened with him. And I often find it interesting that here, Mike Campbell comes and brings you instrumental music.
Yeah.
And Tom Petty sits there and listens to it and puts these lyrics to it that just we're supposed to be there.
Yeah.
I
think the best example of that to me is All or Nothing. And I remember listening to when Campbell says, like Mike says, he goes to him, he brings this, it's a great lick, and that slide guitar is just so badass. But then we get these lyrics, Sweet Chariot of LA Swing Low, at twilight time, smog. I mean, who writes that? No one writes like that.
Nobody. And I think Tom's music will live beyond our generation. There's no doubt in my mind. He's
Absolutely.
multi-generational.
Yeah.
And like I've said, I've never seen fans as loyal to an artist as
Yeah.
his.
Yeah.
And
Well, and him to his fans too, though, right? That was a two-way thing. He was very loyal to his fans as well. I mean, look at the way
very,
he stood up for the fans on, the Hard Promises. No, you're not releasing this at superstar pricing. It goes out, or we're calling it $8.98. That's a done deal. You're not ripping off my fans. And he never overcharged for his concert tickets. That's just, to me, that I think, again, that authenticity. People know that that's the real deal. He's Philadelphia, the greatest show we've ever played. It's just bullshit, and people feed off that. But he never did that, right? He was just honest with people. And that's why we love him.
I never saw a bad Tom Petty concert in my life, ever. And I've seen hundreds.
How many would you guess that you've seen, do you think?
150? I don't know.
Wow,
yeah, like I said, I used to go out with him and see as many concerts as I could make my boss realize I'm out working. But because I was seeing history every night, like I said, I saw history. Yeah. It's hard to describe. I don't know what happened with us. One of the other things I forgot to tell you about Tom, we'd go over and listen to records. He'd play some and we'd play some.
Yep.
And when I hear a record I like, I would run to Tom's house and play it for him.
Yeah.
And for an example, I took him Tommy Two Tones 8675309.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I took it to him and he went, I'm calling my manager. I want Tommy Two Tone on my next tour. Nobody knew who Tommy Two Tone was.
Oh man, is that ever cool?
Same thing with the Georgia Satellites. I took him, pretty little thing, let me light your candle because Mama, I'm too hard to handle. Yes, I am.
Right.
And he just calls his manager, says, I love this record. I want him on the tour. And that's the kind of guy he was. It was just like, if he believed in something, man, he was all over it.
Well, so generous too. I mean, you talk in the book a little bit about, he was very active in sort of, social issues and with charity and those types of things, but not one of those artists who really shouted about that. He just did it.
No,
he just went and did it.
Yeah. He helped me with a project. It was a company near where I lived in San Fernando Valley, not too far from him, that were decladding fuel rods. And they wanted to take the uranium out of the fuel rods, pack it together, put it on a truck and take it through the San Fernando Valley.
Yeah.
And we found out about that and we protested. And I was named an intervener in the case.
Okay.
And there was 3 people who were interveners, and so he came out. Him and Jane came out to protest, and we won. We beat them.
Yeah.
But that's
good for you.
Yeah,
good for you guys.
He believed in something.
Yeah.
He followed through with it every time. And
was he basically? I mean, because I get that sense too, where you get a lot of people, this sort of the trappings of stardom does tend to change people. And of course it's going to change your lifestyle because you've got more money, so you can do different things. And what you can do is you can have all your friends over for parties very regularly. But I get that sense that he never really changed who he was at his core. He never compromised on artistic vision, never compromised on his relationships with his friends.
Never.
It's quite rare, isn't it? Is it not, in that sort of world? Is that
very, very rare? I mean, we would go to his house at Christmas and it wasn't a big crowd. It was the road crew and myself, my family, and Tom and Jane would pick out gifts individually for each person. Not it's like, oh, everybody gets the same thing. And he knew I was into radios, and he gave me a 450s. I got a bunch of radios over here. You probably can't see them, but you can't see them.
You already got your background on, so
yeah, exactly. I collect old radios. But you go over to his house, and it was just fun. We played baseball every year at Easter, softball. And he was always the pitcher.
Yeah. Was he good?
Oh yeah, he was just underhanded. And he didn't want to run. Tom just didn't want to run.
Didn't want to run.
He was a pitcher for both sides, but
oh man, is that funny?
You'd go for Christmas, and all of a sudden he's jamming with George Harrison and Roger McGuinn, and you just think about this whole thing going, oh my God.
But I think that's the thing with real musicians. It again, like I go back to, it's about the music. George Harrison's the same, Jeff Lynne's the same, Roger McGuinn, they're all the same. They just want to jam. They just the thing that they love doing is playing, right?
Oh yeah.
So an
Oh,
audience of 15,000 or an audience of 20 people in their house, it's the same thing. They're just playing, they're just enjoying
same
themselves.
exact thing. You're so right. That's a
Yeah.
brilliant observation. And sometimes Ben Mom would play the guitar.
Yeah, there's that photo, yeah.
Yeah, a great photo of Ben playing
Yeah.
guitar. I've never seen him play guitar in my life. But those were days that I just can't even describe how what a guy he was. I mean, as he got older and more and bigger, he started getting a little crankier. I will say that.
Right.
You know,
Well, we got it, but we got a great cranky album, The Last DJ, where he really again just went back and stuck it to the record industry again, and said, "I'm not that song, Joe. I'm Joe. I'm the CEO." It's just like that's the biggest FU in rock music. That's superb.
yeah,
This is a guy who's doing that on a major label. That's just incredible. Who has the balls to do that?
He was that kind of guy. If he believed that,
Yeah.
well, we often talked about that time that radio is all of a sudden becoming different. They're being the consultants telling you what to play.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons The Last DJ came out.
Okay. So that was kind of what spurred that partially.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And he cared about people. He cared about his friends. He never forgot. I mean, a lot of artists forget on the way up.
Yeah.
And Tom never did. He never forgot what you did.
Yeah.
And, proof of that for me is, he's dedicated quite a few songs to me at different times. He knew I was in the audience. But the last show at the Hollywood Bowl for 18,000 people, I didn't go backstage before the show. I did an interview on Sirius XM.
Yeah.
And Mark Felside said, if it hadn't been for you, we might not be sitting here right now listening to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
And, I look back and possibly that's true. And I go out to my daughter's with me, and we didn't go backstage because we knew there'd be a lot of people there. I have 3 concerts. I only wanted to go to one, the last one, because there were rumors that he wasn't going to tour. Yep. Maybe a Wildflowers tour, maybe next year. But I went to the last one, and he played 4 songs and really didn't talk to the audience. And I'm sitting out there with my daughter, and the 5th song he plays, he says, I want to dedicate the song to Jon Scott.
Yeah.
I was in 1977. He went to the radio stations with a vengeance and got our record played on the radio. And we're going to dedicate this song to him tonight. We'll never forget him.
Yeah.
But I won't back down, which is what basically I didn't do. I didn't back down.
Exactly. And that's the thing, when you understand that, like, he didn't have to do that.
No.
And you also, you wouldn't have thought any less of him if he hadn't. You know what I mean? But that's just genuine character. That's a strong person with good morals and a good heart, right?
Exactly, absolutely. And I found out later at the memorial, Dana Petty pulled me over, and she said, "John, I just want to explain a couple of things to you." We got into the limousine to go to Hollywood Bowl, and of course the driver has it on Tom Petty radio, XM Sirius 31.
Yeah,
And he gets in he said, we got in the car, and they said, Tom said, we were talking. Tom said, did they just say they were going to interview Jon Scott? And she said, yeah. He said, well, don't say anything. I want to hear this whole interview.
Yeah.
And she said, John, after that interview, and you told the truth, he looked at me and said, everything Jon Scott just said is the absolute truth about how this happened.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there with my daughter, and he dedicates a song to me. I'm in tears.
Oh, well, of course.
I'm in tears for 18,000 people. I didn't know it was happening.
Yeah.
But then, a week later, he was gone.
Yeah. So I was going to say, like, sharing that moment too with your daughter must have been very special.
It was, so special because she was a part of the family of going over to the Petty's house and playing with Adria when she was young.
Yeah.
And Kim, and it was just both, we were both just crying. I mean, it was one
Yeah.
of those moments that I can't even describe.
Yeah, it's
The
beautiful. I mean,
feeling.
so my, and again, I'll throw it back, but my youngest girl, so she's into the records and she's 14 now. I have a very good friend in Saskatoon where I live who's in a big rock, well, not a big rock, it's in a rock band, phenomenal artist. One of those guys who, if he'd had you pushing him, he would be a superstar now. I'm absolutely serious. He would be a superstar now because he's that good. Anyways, so my daughter really likes them. They're a hard rock, like a pretty, like Audio Slave, sort of, pretty hard edge rock and roll. And
Mhm.
so they've got this song that they play. It's called Stolen, and it's my daughter's favorite song on this record. And so
Mhm.
they've got this gig opening up for a band that used to be pretty big in the 90s, and they're going to play they're the only night. They're going to play half an hour. So, and
Mhm.
it's all ages. So finally, because they only play bars, finally my daughter can go see him live. So I say, okay, we'll go out there, and we get down, and we get front row. And same thing as when you went to the whiskey. There's no one there. There's only like 20
Right,
people. We're there
exactly.
for the main act. So which is great because we can go and listen. And so they play their set, and they just blow the roof off. And the
Yeah.
last song they play is Stolen. And Chris gets on the mic, my friend, and says, I want to dedicate this to Emma, who's a big supporter of ours, and she's standing on the front row watching us. And so,
Wow.
same thing. So she gets this thing where her favorite song by one of her favorite bands has just been dedicated to her by the singer. So I understand that sort of what that would feel. Now, of course, that's not Tom Petty doing it in front of 18,000 people at the
Right.
ball, but
Well,
it's the same kind of feeling, right? Where,
same feel, exactly. I
just that
mean,
connection with your friend. That's my friend up there, and he's still taking time out to just say something nice to someone. I think that's just class to me. That's just
Tom
absolute
did
class.
Tom did a lot of things for me. My house flooded in 1980, and
Yeah.
the insurance company said, "Oh, this is an act of God," and they wouldn't pay for anything.
Yeah.
We were sleeping on army cots, my wife and my daughter.
Yeah.
And Tom heard about it, and he said, You're coming to my house and living with me."
Yeah.
We stayed there for 30 days, and it was insane how.
And again, he could have put you in a hotel
Oh yeah,
easily, right? He could have easily paid for you to put in, but no, come stay with us. Yeah,
yeah,
that's just quality.
exactly.
You
And
don't make
then
it.
one more time several times, but I moved to Hawaii on the island of Kauai in
Yeah.
1991, and my wife and I built the house over there. We wanted to get out of LA,
Yeah.
and we loved Hawaii, especially the island of Kauai. And we built the house, and 3 months later, on September 10th, there was a hurricane going across the top of the islands.
Yeah.
And everybody's going, "Oh, it's going to just brush everybody." And all of a sudden, it took a right turn and headed right over the island of Kauai.
Oh my God.
And we got lucky and got a room at a hotel.
Yeah.
And it was 215-mile-an-hour sustained winds. And I get home. Well, we stayed in the hotel for 5 days. And I called the night before and said, I'd like to book a room at the Princeville Hotel in Kauai. And they said, all we have is ocean fronts, $400 a night. I was going, I'll take it. I'll take it. And the next morning I get there, and there's a line a mile long, and they're going, "Well, we don't have
Yeah.
any rooms." And anyway, the hurricane took my roof off my house. Nobody in Princeville, Kauai is a small island, and on this town we lived in Princeville, Kauai,
Right.
there was one hardwood store. They must have had 10 generators. There's 100 people in line trying to get a generator.
Yep.
And we were told it was going to be 6 to 8 weeks before we would get power.
Oh my God.
And a few days later, when we were cooking everything we had in the freezer, and
Yeah.
and I get a message that Tom Petty's had sent me a generator, and I had to go to FedEx and pick it up because FedEx was not delivering.
Yeah.
And I have a generator. I'm the only person in the neighborhood who has a generator, and that's Tom. That's Tom and Jane. They were there, and that's just another reason why he was such a great man.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I mean, like you said, the week after that last concert, and suddenly the unimaginable happens. And for us, for the rest of us fans, it's awful because we've lost Tom Petty. But you and the band and Dana and his kids, they've lost. That's their friend and their dad and their. I can't even imagine how you get through that. And I know you said, like, I think it was on Facebook, that on the second or something, where it still doesn't seem real, right? That he's not.
No, it doesn't.
How could it be that Tom Petty isn't here?
It doesn't feel real because a lot of people I found out, like myself, I have dreams from time to time. Maybe once or twice a month, I'll have a dream about Tom Petty.
Yeah.
After he passed away, in a dream, he came to me and said, John, write a book called Tom Petty and Me.
Yeah.
I started writing the next day.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things. It just all came to me. It's like I kept no notes. It was just all from memory, and the memories are just history.
You clearly have a pretty good memory for that kind of stuff, though, too, because you recall, you can recall certain dates and people's names. You seem to have a really good recall for those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, because there were a few things that were happening during those times. And you know what I'm talking about.
A chemically enhanced state, let's say.
But there's some great stories in my book that nobody's ever heard, and I think I wanted the fans to know how a band got from here to there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, "Oh, Coldplay, they're a big record, you know, big hit, whatever it used to be, or maybe they still are." But it's just not goes here and then here without something happening or a reason why.
Well, and that's why in my intro, I use the expression rock and roll royalty very sincerely, because the PR guys, A&R, roadies, managers, all these people make the machinery work so that those guys can get up on stage, or they can get a record out and they can connect with us. But it takes all that other stuff as well.
Right.
And I don't know, obviously, you're not sort of in that actively involved in the business anymore, but you think about nowadays, a kid with a guitar like Tom Petty, he has to do all his own, he probably has to do his own website. He probably has to do all his own marketing. He probably has to learn about all of those things. So that's all taking time away from what he should be doing, is writing music.
Exactly.
Right. So thank God Tom had people like you and Jimmy Iovine and Mike and all these guys around him to be that support and to be able to sort of help push the whole thing forward. Right.
Yeah. There's a book out there called The Outliers.
Okay.
And somebody sent it to me, and it's about things that were supposed to happen.
Right.
And Tom and I are in that book about, you know, the coincidences that led to our meeting.
But like, again, I'll go back to what I was saying before, and we use that word serendipity a lot. And obviously there's coincidence and there's luck and all those kinds of elements, but you should realize at some point, dude, that you seem to be a kind of person who, when you decide to do something, you do it and you do it hard, and you don't stop until you get to where you want to be. You got Johnny, you know, you've recognized Mellencamp, you broke Tom Petty, you've written a frigging book, and like you said, you're not an author, right? But I was going to just
thing I've ever done.
Well, and just to comment on the book, really honestly, I love about it, and I read a lot, and I've read lots and lots of different rock and roll memoirs. I know Paul McCartney's what was that called? Fantastic biography about him was excellent. But what I love about your book, more so than, and I love Warren Zane's book, and I like Paul Zolo's book, but it's the conversational style in your book. It feels like this. It feels like we're just sitting in a little pub somewhere, having a few pints, and you tell me about all these adventures you had with Tom Petty. And it's your voice is 100% authentic, and it comes through. It's you. This is not ghost written. It sounds like you. I can hear you now, and it's exactly the same as what it is in my head. And the other thing that I really liked was, I'm sure there's a ton of stuff you could have been in there that would have been very salacious, and people being up to all kinds of things and all that kind of stuff that a lot of rock and roll's tales are. But again, I'm a process geek. I like learning about all this stuff that you were doing in the industry, all this PR stuff that I didn't know existed. I didn't know that was what was going on back then, learning about the record companies and focusing on the music, focusing on that's the stuff that I'm interested in. I don't care who was shagging who and who was doing what blow off what. You know what I mean? I don't care about any of this. It's boring. You've heard it all before, right? Tell me about the interesting stuff, you know? So yeah, I think I was going to,
Thank you.
Yeah. So no, I genuinely, that's not me just blowing smoke up your ass. I'm a big fan of yours as much as I'm Tom Petty, because I recognize through what you've written and everything you've said in any interviews that I've listened to is that you're 100% genuine guy. And I wish that everyone would buy this book. I hope that everyone buys this book. I mean, I've got 2 more coming, and they're going to go out to different people just to get people reading it, because people, even if you're not a huge Tom Petty fan, I think people, if you like music and you're into sort of the 70s scene and into just sort of those kinds of things, anybody can read this book. Like I said, kids can read this book. It's approachable. It's fun.
There is a lot of drug.
Well, no, but I mean, that's
only marijuana. Okay, we spoke pot. It's legal now in most places.
Yeah, and it's legal in Canada, and it's to me it's just a recreational drug. People don't have the same hangs up in alcohol.
No,
Alcohol wrecks far more lives than friggin' marijuana ever did.
I really never saw Tom drink a lot either. I mean, he
No.
did every once in a while, but
Yeah.
no, we would just sit around the house and
Yeah.
get to the point. And
Yeah.
that was the great thing about hanging with Tom. He was he's a student of music. He was a
Yeah.
student of Little Richard. He was a student
Yes.
of the Zombies. He was a student of Solomon Burke, and he loved the music.
Yeah.
But
Okay. I have one question. I'm going to one question or two questions actually, quickly, and then we'll do a bit of wrap up. But then I want to give you a chance to tell people where you're going to be in the immediate future and the deal about the 2-for-1 on the website.
yeah,
But there's two things that stood out for me, in the two other things that stood out in the book. So this promote, and it's that it's in there. So is that a mantra? Like, is that something you picked up from someone else, or was that just something that you
No.
came up with to just okay?
No, I used to tell Tom, and then sometimes he would go, "We got to do this radio interview," and I go, "Tom, promote." This kind of thing I used to tell him all the time.
Yeah.
And I think one of the faxes, I mean, the faxes are another story in my book. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I can't even describe the faxes. People would just have to buy my book to understand
For
how
sure.
Tom Petty and me were faxing each other. I mean, I can't even imagine Tom Petty standing in a fax machine.
It's absolutely hilarious. It cracked me up. The whole bit with Roger McGuinn comes over and he gets you to fax him so that Roger McGuinn from the Birds can see what a fax looks like. It's so funny. It's so funny.
We were the only two people we knew who had a fax, and so we were just at the beginning, we were just faxing each other. You know,
Yeah.
I would tell him what trade, how the wheelbarrows were doing, and then I get this fax from him going, "John, anybody home? I want to show Roger McGuinn how a fax machine works."
It's just so bizarre, right? It's just so like, what are you talking about?
Imagine an artist standing around, and at that point,
Yeah.
it was right around the traveling Wilburys, and we turned that into we faxed 100 radio stations.
Yeah.
Tom did.
Yeah.
Faxed 100 radio stations. Just, "Hi, WBCN. This is Tom Petty." Or this is Charlie T. Wilbury.
Yes.
And I just want to say thanks for playing all our records and whatever.
Yeah.
And he didn't blink an eye. I'll fax him, and then I would get calls from radio stations going, "Hey, we just got this fax from Charlie T. Wilbury. Is it really him?" I said, "Just fax him back. He wants you to fax him back." And they did. Radio stations started faxing Tom back, and he was like a kid in a candy store, man.
Yeah, that's so funny. Cool. So the other question I was going to touch on quickly, you talked about it was in the piece where you're talking about the interview at Cal State, you know,
Right.
that whole fiasco of trying to get there and get out and whatnot. But you mentioned something called the Memphis Mumbles. And I was wondering what that is, because I don't know what that term means.
Well, I mean, I think it's actually a disease called the Memphis Mumbles. I mean, like, think Elvis, "Homo baby, homo baby, homo baby."
Okay, so just not articulated, sort of kind of.
We just mumble. You can't understand it. And I think you can look it up in the Memphis Mumbles, and it will come up. It is a disease known to only people from Memphis.
Tell my listeners where you're going to be coming up so they can check out your book signings. Tell them what the offer is on the website right now. Promote.
Well, on Wednesday, which is 2 days from now, I'm not sure when this interview is going to
go out on Wednesday. Yeah, it'll be going out on Wednesday.
So I'll be in Fresno, California, where my sister-in-law lives, and we'll be watching the premiere of Wildflowers. But before that, I'm doing a book signing for a couple hours. And God, I love do book signings. The Tom Petty fans just come up and they're so genuine, and they're just so nice. And I love doing book signings, or just because the fans are, like I said, as you know, if you've been on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, these people are like nobody I've ever seen in my life. Fans.
Passionate.
On Tom Petty Nation. I mean, it's like silly. It's like the Rolling Stones. It's like,
I don't think people love Jagger the same way they love Petty, though. You know what I mean? They love the music, but I don't think they love him the same way that he engendered that, the respect and the affection that he engendered from his fans. It's unique. It's just different.
It's very unique. You're exactly right.
Well, and this is and this book, I'll wrap it up by saying this. Maybe this book, I think, is a gift to the rest of us, to us fans, because it gives us another insight into an artist and a human being that we
Yeah.
all love
Yeah.
through the lens of another really authentic, really awesome, humble guy.
Yeah. You can buy the book on my website, tompettyandme.com. And I sign every book. And if anybody wants it personalized, there's a place for people to personalize it. And like I told you before, the one thing I love is when the kids go, sign this to my dad, Bill, who turned me on to Tom Petty when I was 11.
Yeah.
And it just shows what a multi-generational thing that Tom Petty is. But you can buy it on my website. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon Kindle. And I did an audio version of it, which is really hard to do, I'll tell you. Anyway,
Awesome, man. Okay.
if you have anything else you want to know, if you missed, I don't know.
Yeah,
I've
man.
rambled, I know, for how many hours now we've been?
A couple and a half. Yeah. No, it's all good. Yeah, and I'm a big fan of your book.
Thank you.
So, and I will keep promoting it on my podcast and on my social media. Thank you so much for giving me so much of your time. I'm beyond appreciative.
Well, anytime I feel a person like yourself who appreciates Tom Petty, and I can tell you do.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
it means that much more to me.
Awesome, man. And I really hope so. The best of luck with the rest of the book signings coming up. And I'm hopeful that we see another Jon Scott book somewhere down the line, because I know you have a lot more stories to tell. Okay, well, that's a wrap on a conversation that I will treasure for the rest of my life, folks. I reached out to Jon fully expecting not to really get anywhere, as my podcast is still growing and he's Jon Scott. So to not only get to speak to Jon and get a response from him, but also to enjoy such a long and intimate conversation about his friend is beyond humbling, and it was just so cool. Please make sure you head over to tompettyandme.com. Pick up Jon's book if you don't have it already. And if you do have the book, maybe go to his website and leave a review. Those are very useful for him. You should also follow his social media channels, because he regularly posts, other anecdotes and photos from his archive that you may not have seen or may not have heard. And they're always well worth checking out. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Tom Petty Project, or at Tom Petty Project on Twitter. And please leave a review or a rating of the podcast if you haven't so far. If you're enjoying the podcast, give it a share on your social media and help me spread the word. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to Tom Petty. Keep sharing his music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I will be back with you next week to talk about the last track on the debut album, American Girl. Bye-bye.
hang